We have MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delaney, and outside the courthouse where the suspect will make his first appearance. And MS Now's Laura Barone Lopez at the White House. Also with us, retired Secret Service Special Agent Bobby McDonald and MS Now national security analyst, former FBI supervisor Rob D'Amico. Ken, what can we expect there in court, and what more do we know now about this suspect and the attack?
Good morning, Anna. We actually know a surprising amount about what happened with this attack and perhaps what may have motivated this suspect, Cole Allen, 31 years old, from Torrance, California, well-educated, attended Caltech, got a master's degree in computer science, was working as a teacher, by all accounts living a normal life, but somehow became radicalized and obtained these weapons, a shotgun, a handgun, and knives, and took the train across country with a plan, clearly, because he checked into this hotel knowing that that would make it easier for him to mount this attack. And then he used his access as a hotel guest to make his way down the stairs, reportedly, to the floor above the ballroom, where he charged that security checkpoint with the metal detectors and the magnetometers after most people had been already inside the ballroom. And we can see on that now infamous video, he makes it past the first layer of officers, who then draw their guns and begin shooting at him. And we don't see it in the frame, but he apparently was tackled and subdued before he could get close to that ballroom. And then minutes of chaos ensued as armed Secret Service and tactical response units evacuated all the VIPs. In terms of the why, we're learning a lot because he sent a 1,000-word missive to his family members explaining exactly why he did this. And he said he was targeting Trump administration officials. He didn't explicitly say he wanted to kill Donald Trump, but that was the implication. He called the president a pedophile and a rapist, and said he felt like he had an obligation to take action. And all this is coming amid increasing questions, as you said, about the security posture around Donald Trump. FBI Director Kash Patel was grilled about this on Fox News. Take a listen.
The president of the United States is averaging an assassination attempt once a year. There's still people in leadership at the Secret Service that were responsible for Butler. How does that happen? It was a failure.
Right. I can't speak to Butler, and I agree it was a total failure. Absolutely. But I have full confidence in Secretary Markwayne Mullin. He oversees the United States Secret Service. I've talked to him repeatedly over the weekend, and I've spoken with him and said, whatever you need from the FBI, whatever we can assist in, and however we can better prepare to protect our protectees going forward with the United States Secret Service, this FBI stands ready to do it.
Now, President Trump and Attorney General Todd Blanche and others have said that the Secret Service succeeded here. They kept this man from harming the president. He did not make it through the last line of defense, the perimeter around the ballroom. But there are larger questions about why this event wasn't better secured. It's been that way for decades. It's an open, working hotel, and increasing questions going forward about whether it can exist this way again.
That's right, Laura. There is a lot of criticism right now coming from different sides of the political spectrum, as well as from the law enforcement community, about the security on Saturday night. How is the president reacting, and is the White House adapting any of its security measures?
Anna, well, as Ken said, the president, as well as acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and many others across the administration, are saying that this was a security success story, and they've been praising the work of the Secret Service and saying that what needed to be done was done. Now, the president was asked about the security, was asked about writings by the alleged gunmen, where he criticized the lack of security. CBS asked the president about this, 60 Minutes did, and here's what the president had to say.
And he wrote this quote: "I expected security cameras at every bend, bugged hotel rooms, armed agents every 10 feet, metal detectors out the wazoo. What I got is nothing." He wrote, "Like, this level of incompetence is insane." Sir, you have already had two.
Well, he was pretty incompetent, too, because he got caught. And he got caught pretty easily. So I'd say he was pretty incompetent, too. You know, I could take any event having to do with security or anything else. I can always find fault. Those guys did a good job last night. They did a really good job.
And that was a sentiment we heard. I was at the press conference that the president had after Saturday's shooting, where he said he had no complaints about Secret Service. Now, a senior White House official told MS Now, again, that the president personally believes that the Secret Service did an excellent job, and that Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, is going to be holding meetings with U.S. Secret Service, with the White House operations team, and Department of Homeland Security officials in order to determine if there are other security or safety protocols that can be taken, especially if an event like this is to happen again, which the president says he wants to have in about 30 days. But Anna, one of the biggest takeaways from the president has been, and one of the biggest takeaways from those around him, including the Justice Department, is that they are arguing that this means that his East Wing ballroom, the 90,000 square foot ballroom, needs to be built, and that would be the safest place for the president, and that he wouldn't have to venture outside the walls of the White House. Now, that's also received criticism from former FBI agents and former Secret Service, saying that the president needs to be among the people. And what does that mean? He'll never have an event outside of the White House? We've asked the White House about that, and they haven't responded to questions about that, Anna.
And as we come back to the security on Saturday night, here's an account from the Daily Beast editor who stayed at this hotel about the security posture that night. Quote, "I moved up and down from floor 10 all day. Nobody ever stopped me and asked me anything. I've never shown my ID except to the clerk who checked me in. I have never been searched or frisked when I checked in or moved in and out of the hotel. To get down from my room to the dinner, I simply flashed my ticket. I could have shown a photocopy." Rob, now we understand the protocol for these events isn't to lock down an entire functioning hotel, but does this suggest hotels in the security perimeter had holes? I mean, the security perimeter wasn't shored up?
Well, obviously, a non-trained person found the gaps. So if you're going to have an open hotel, then you have to make that security perimeter tougher to get through. So the fact that they had just a pathway he could run down, if they had just had a serpentine, like, I wrote that article about like a TSA at the airport where you have to go back and forth to get to the point. If they had had that up and that person then wanted to get over that, he would have had to remove it, jump it, and that would have given the agents that actually did a great job, but they didn't have to. It would have given them further distance to know that he was up to something no good before he could just run past them. So again, when you look at the simple basics that you look at security things, just having a line where you have to walk back and forth or physical obstacles that you have to go around gives those agents more time to figure out his intent. And that's where it comes in. If I would say it's a success, if he got off the stairwell, that walking down to that and got stopped right there with weapons, they wouldn't have had to put the president on the floor. They wouldn't have had to pull the VP out. They would have notified everyone we just found the gun, and they probably would have gotten the president and the vice president out, but not in that situation. And they wouldn't have had to have gunfire to stop them.
Yeah, that video we keep seeing is just so chilling. Bobby, we just outlined the ground level security, but in terms of broader planning, the Washington Post reports the Trump administration provided a lower level of security than it has for other gatherings of high-ranking officials, even though the president and so many cabinet members were in attendance, according to officials familiar with the plan. And they go on to report the dinner was not designated a national special security event, which would have had Secret Service running things. Bobby, why not? And how would that have changed the security presence?
Well, good morning, Anna. And I do agree with a lot of what my colleague Rob just said with respect to distance and time being able to help us in this situation. As far as an NSSC goes, I don't think that would make a whole lot of difference in this situation. The state, local, and federal partners in and around D.C. work every day together on movements of the president and vice president. They're going to be getting ready for big events like the State of the Union and all of the different things that go around with those NSSCs. But in this instance, they need a venue that will hold this amount of people and unfortunately can provide food service. There's not really another venue that I'm aware of in D.C. that can handle this type of volume. I think that an NSSC component is not necessary because the Secret Service is following the NSSC protocols every day when it develops a security plan anyway. The NSSC just brings a component of time and planning of committees and all sorts of other entities getting involved. The people who needed to be involved in this are the local state and federal partners who worked together every day and coordinated the security in this event. I'm a little troubled by the comment that said that the Trump administration provided a lower level of security. I'm not sure how the Trump administration has a say in the level of security. We work with the White House staff, the staff and the leadership of the Bureau, the reporters group, and the hotel, as well as the Secret Service. So I'm not sure where that comment came from, and would love to know a little bit more about that. And if that was the case, that would be very concerning.
Well, the Trump administration, I think, encompasses DHS, which is, of course, in charge of the Secret Service. So I think that was what was the point. But Rob, I mean, this was held at a hotel, and the hotel was open to other guests, clearly. And we don't know yet when this individual checked into the hotel. But, I mean, now hindsight's 2020. In this day and age, is a hotel maybe not the best place to host an event like this involving the president? What if someone brought a bomb into the hotel?
Well, there's always that possibility, and you have to weigh that against, the president does need to be out doing things, and where else can you have this? Obviously Trump's using this to have it for his ballroom, but he still has to do things. Again, when you have a working hotel, then you just have to do things differently to the point where there's no vehicles coming in at a certain time. Just a few months ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu was down here in the Four Seasons. I had a friend that was there, and I went in. And they stopped me before I got on property. They searched my car. I was actually carrying a weapon at the time. They kind of like a little freaked out a bit. But I said, retired FBI, it's South Florida. I carry arms. And I came up to agreement to park my car across the street, lock the weapon in there. And then they searched everyone going in that hotel. So what was the difference between a foreign prime minister and the president, plus a bunch of his cabinet members and members of Congress? And they didn't even have the same levels of protection for those. So I'm a little bit misunderstanding, like, how could you have an event, like Ken said, about the State of the Union, where you're doing more for a foreign prime minister that doesn't have the same threats against them?